The crystal champagne flute shattered against Italian marble at exactly 11:47 p.m., and that's when Marcus Chen's $4.2 billion empire stopped mattering. His maid, Rosa Delgado, the quiet woman who'd worked in his Los Angeles mansion for 8 years, was crumpling to the floor in his study doorway. Not fainting, not slipping. Crumpling, like her bones had simply given up supporting her weight. What Marcus didn't know in that moment, as he lunged forward to catch her 53-year-old frame before her head struck the floor, was that Rosa had been awake for 71 consecutive hours. He didn't know she'd been sleeping in her car in his driveway for the past 6 months. He didn't know she'd sold her own diabetes medication to pay for his daughter's art supplies when his personal assistant had forgotten to reimburse the petty cash. He didn't know she'd been raising his children while he'd been building an empire. But he was about to learn everything. "Mr. Chen," Rosa's voice barely registered above a whisper as her eyes rolled back. Marcus caught her, his Brioni suit jacket wrinkling as he lowered her carefully to the floor. Her skin felt like parchment. When had she gotten so thin? "Call 911, he shouted toward the hallway, where his business partner Davidson stood frozen, mid-sentence in whatever pitch he'd been making about the Singapore acquisition. The deal they'd been discussing, $340 million, suddenly seemed obscene and distant. Marcus pressed 2 fingers to Rosa's neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, rapid and thready. "Rosa, stay with me. The ambulance is coming." Her lips moved. He leaned closer. "The children," she whispered. "Tuesday. Emma has science fair." Then she was gone, unconscious in his arms, and Marcus Chen realized with devastating clarity that he didn't know what his daughter had for the science fair on Tuesday. He didn't know when it was. He didn't know if Emma was still interested in science or if she'd moved on to something else. Rosa knew. Rosa, who earned $45,000 a year in a house where Marcus's watch collection was worth $2.3 million, knew his children better than he did. But this revelation, the one that would reshape everything he thought he understood about success, family, and the true cost of wealth, this was only the beginning. To understand how Marcus Chen ended up kneeling on his study floor, holding his unconscious housekeeper, you need to understand 2 very different stories. One about a boy from Vancouver who turned server optimization algorithms into a tech empire, and one about a woman from Oaxaca who turned survival into an art form. Both stories begin with loss. Marcus Chen was 9 years old when his father's restaurant burned down. The Golden Dragon had been a fixture in Vancouver's Chinatown for 15 years. Nothing fancy, just reliable Cantonese food, and his father's dream of being his own boss after 2 decades of working in other people's kitchens. The fire started in Fuwai, the electrical wiring at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in March 1987. By 4 a.m., everything was gone. Insurance had lapsed 2 months earlier. His father had chosen to pay for Marcus's private school tuition instead. Marcus remembered watching his father's hands shake as he held the notice from the bank. Those hands had spent years mastering knife techniques, had built intricate ice sculptures for wedding banquets, had held Marcus during nightmares. Now they trembled over a piece of paper that said they had 45 days to vacate their apartment above the restaurant. "We will rebuild," his mother said, her voice iron despite the tears on her face. They didn't rebuild. They survived. His father took a job as a line cook at a hotel, working doubles. His mother cleaned houses. Marcus became a latchkey kid who did homework in library corners and learned that the world was divided into 2 types of people: those who controlled their circumstances and those who were crushed by them. He chose to never be crushed again. At 14, Marcus was writing code in the school computer lab during lunch. At 16, he won a national programming competition with an algorithm that optimized server loads in real time. At 18, he dropped out of the University of British Columbia after 1 semester because Kleiner Perkins offered him $2.4 million in seed funding for his cloud infrastructure startup. His parents begged him to stay in school. They didn't understand that their son had learned their lesson too well, that security came from ownership, from building something no one could take away, from never depending on a single point of failure again. NetVault Technologies went public in 2003 when Marcus was 24. His stake was worth $340 million overnight. By 2008, after acquiring 3 competitors and surviving the financial crisis by betting against conventional wisdom, he'd personally made $1.8 billion. Forbes called him the boy wonder of cloud computing. TechCrunch dubbed him the anti-Zuckerberg, more strategic than visionary, more paranoid than optimistic, more focused on infrastructure than user experience. What they didn't write about was his first marriage, which lasted 18 months before his wife Jessica left, citing his emotional unavailability and obsession with building empires instead of relationships. Or his second marriage to Carolyn, a venture capitalist he met at a conference in Dubai, which lasted long enough to produce 2 children, Emma and Michael, before dissolving in a quiet divorce settled with $47 million and an airtight NDA. Marcus got primary custody. Carolyn got her freedom and enough money to start her own fund. The children got Rosa. Rosa Maria Delgado was 45 years old when she crossed the border. She left Oaxaca with $340 in cash sewn into the lining of her backpack, a photograph of her daughter Luz, and a phone number for her cousin Maria in Los Angeles. The coyotes charged her $8,000, money borrowed from a loan shark who promised to collect from her family if she didn't pay within 2 years. She'd had no choice. Luz, her 16-year-old daughter, had been diagnosed with leukemia. The treatment in Mexico City would cost $45,000. The survival rate with treatment was 73%. Without treatment, Luz had 6 months. Rosa had been a teacher in Oaxaca. She spoke 3 languages, Spanish, Zapotec, and English, and had a bachelor's degree in education from the state university. None of that mattered at the border. What mattered was whether you could run fast enough when the lights came on, whether you could stay quiet enough in the hidden compartment of the truck, whether you could endure. She endured. The crossing took 4 days. Rosa still had nightmares about the desert, about the mother and child who didn't make it, about the way the coyote had looked at her on the second night, before his partner told him to leave the old ones alone. She was 35, not old, but grief had aged her. She arrived in Los Angeles with no money. The remaining $340 had gone to a coyote who'd threatened to abandon her in the desert. No papers, and a debt that was growing by 15% compound interest every month. Maria got her a job cleaning house. Cash, no questions. Rosa worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. She sent every spare dollar to the loan shark in Oaxaca, who sent it to the hospital in Mexico City, who kept Luz alive in 6-week increments. For 2 years, Rosa was invisible. She scrubbed toilets in Beverly Hills mansions, while their owners debated which Tesla to buy. She washed dishes at a restaurant in Santa Monica, where a single entree cost what she made in a day. She learned to be silent, efficient, and utterly forgettable. She paid off the loan shark in 22 months. Luz went into remission after 18 months of treatment. Rosa cried for 3 hours straight when Maria showed her the text from Oaxaca with the medical report. Then she kept working because Luz needed monitoring, checkups, medication. Because remission wasn't cure. Because Rosa would never again be in a position where her child's life depended on money she didn't have. That's when Maria told her about the job with the Chen family. Rich tech guy, 2 young kids, just divorced, Maria explained over coffee in her tiny apartment in Koreatown. His assistant called the agency. They need someone full-time, live-in option. $45,000 a year, health insurance, benefits, legal. He sponsors for Green Card. Rosa's hands had trembled around her coffee cup. Legal. Green Card. Health insurance. What's wrong with him? She asked. Nobody pays that much for clean house. Maria shrugged. Maybe nothing wrong. Maybe he's just really rich and really busy and needs someone who cares. Rosa took the interview. She met Marcus Chen in his Brentwood mansion on a Wednesday afternoon in April 2015. He was 36, intense, distracted, scrolling through his phone even as he shook her hand. I travel a lot, he said without preamble. Singapore, London, New York. Sometimes I'm gone 2 weeks at a time. My kids are 7 and 5. Emma and Michael. The nanny quit because... He paused, his jaw tightening. Because I'm apparently difficult to work for. I need someone who can cook, clean, and watch the kids when I'm gone. And I need someone who won't quit. I don't quit, Rosa said quietly. Something in her voice made him look up from his phone. Really look at her for the first time. She met his eyes steadily. This woman with gray threading through her dark hair, with hands rough from bleach and work, with eyes that had seen things his billions couldn't imagine. When can you start? He asked. Today, she said. She moved into the small bedroom off the kitchen that afternoon. That night, she met Emma and Michael. Emma, 7 years old, had her father's intensity and her mother's striking features. Michael, 5, was quiet, cautious, watching Rosa with solemn eyes. Are you going to leave too? Michael asked while Rosa unpacked her single suitcase. No, mijo, Rosa promised. I'm going to stay. She kept that promise for 8 years. What neither of them knew in that first moment was how much that promise would cost her, or how it would save them both. The first year was an adjustment. Marcus traveled constantly, building his empire. NetVault Technologies was expanding into Southeast Asian markets, fighting brutal competition from Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. He'd identified a market inefficiency. Mid-tier companies in emerging economies needed cloud infrastructure, but couldn't afford enterprise pricing. His solution was elegant: proprietary compression algorithms that reduced server costs by 40% while maintaining performance. It was working. Revenue was climbing. But it required his constant attention, endless negotiations, brutal travel schedules. Emma and Michael required attention too. Rosa gave it to them. She woke at 5:30 a.m. every morning. By 6 a.m. she'd prepped breakfast. Nothing fancy at first, just reliable nutrition. Oatmeal with fruit, scrambled eggs, whole grain toast. She packed their lunches. She learned that Emma hated tomatoes, but loved carrots, that Michael would only eat sandwiches cut diagonally, that both kids were lactose intolerant, but Marcus kept buying regular milk because he forgot. She drove them to school at 7:45 a.m. in the Tesla Marcus had designated for household use. She learned the route, the other parents, the names of their teachers. Then she returned to the mansion and cleaned. All 12 bedrooms, even though only 3 were in use. 8 bathrooms, the chef's kitchen that Marcus never cooked in, the home gym where dusty equipment gathered cobwebs, the home office where Marcus sometimes worked until 3 a.m. before catching a 6 a.m. flight. She grocery shopped, comparing prices even though Marcus had told her to just buy whatever. She cooked dinner that often sat untouched in the refrigerator because Marcus was in London or Singapore. She picked up the kids from school at 3:15 p.m. And then the real work began. Emma needed help with homework. Michael needed someone to play with. Both needed someone to listen, to care, to notice when Emma was struggling with fractions or when Michael was being bullied by an older boy on the playground. Rosa noticed everything. She also noticed that Marcus barely called. That when he did call, he asked about his companies, his meetings, his deals, and only remembered to ask about Emma and Michael after Rosa gently reminded him that he'd promised to be home for Emma's 8th birthday and missed it because of an emergency board meeting in Tokyo. Rosa held Emma while she cried that night, this little girl who'd already lost one parent to divorce and was losing another to ambition. "He doesn't love us," Emma sobbed into Rosa's shoulder. "He does," Rosa whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure. "He just doesn't know how to show it." She was making excuses for him even then, but that was the beginning, the moment when Rosa's role shifted from employee to something else, something neither of them had a name for yet. 3 months into the job, Marcus came home at 2 a.m. to find Rosa still awake in the kitchen, preparing the next day's meals. "Why are you still up?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Michael has a field trip tomorrow. I wanted to make sure he has lunch ready. He's allergic to peanuts. Did you know that?" Marcus stared at her. He hadn't known. The nanny before Rosa must have handled it, or maybe Carolyn had set it up during her custody weeks. He'd never asked. "You should sleep," he said finally. "You don't need to do all this." "Someone needs to," Rosa replied quietly. She didn't say it with accusation, just fact. Someone needed to remember Michael's allergy. Someone needed to notice that Emma was reading 3 grades above level and needed more challenging books. Someone needed to be there when the kids had nightmares, or questions, or just needed a hug. Marcus left for Singapore the next morning without responding. But when he returned 2 weeks later, Rosa's salary had increased to $60,000, and there was a note in his sharp handwriting. "Thank you for caring about them." It was the most emotion he'd shown in months. Rosa kept the note in her Bible. Years later, when paramedics were lifting her onto a stretcher, while Marcus watched with stricken eyes, that note would be found in her bedside table, creased from being folded and refolded hundreds of times. But that comes later. The second year, things got complicated. NetVault Technologies hit a crisis in March 2016. A security breach exposed data from 40,000 corporate clients. The stock dropped 34% in one trading session. Marcus lost $840 million in paper wealth in 6 hours. He stopped coming home entirely for 3 weeks. He lived in his Palo Alto office, managing the crisis, firing the entire security team, personally calling affected clients. Emma and Michael asked where their father was. "Working very hard to fix something," Rosa told them. "He'll be home soon." He came home gaunt, 20 pounds lighter, with dark circles under his eyes. Rosa had dinner waiting, his favorite dishes, which she'd learned by quietly watching what he actually ate versus what he claimed to like. She'd made juk, the rice porridge his mother used to make when he was sick. She'd made lap cheong, Chinese sausage, sliced thin. She'd made gai lan with oyster sauce, simple and perfect. Marcus sat at the kitchen table at 11 p.m., this man worth billions, who was currently eating a $6 meal his maid had prepared, and started crying. Rosa didn't say anything. She just sat across from him, this quiet presence who'd kept his household running while his company imploded. "I don't know how to do this," he finally said. "Any of it. The company I can fix. But the kids..." He gestured helplessly toward the stairs where Emma and Michael were sleeping. "I'm failing them. I'm becoming my father, working myself to death for money while my kids grow up without me." "Your father worked for you," Rosa said gently. "You work for... what? More money you don't need?" It was the most direct thing she'd ever said to him. For a moment, Marcus looked angry. Then the anger collapsed into something worse. Recognition. "I don't know how to stop," he whispered. "Maybe start small," Rosa suggested. "Come to Emma's piano recital next week. Just 3 hours. The company will survive 3 hours." He came to the recital. He sat in the back, checking his phone every 5 minutes. But he came. And he saw Emma's face light up when she spotted him in the audience. He saw her play her piece, for Elise, slightly imperfect but heartfelt, and realized he'd never heard her play before. After the recital, Emma ran to him instead of Rosa. "Did you like it, Daddy?" "You were amazing," Marcus said, and meant it. That night, Rosa found $10,000 in cash on her bedside table with another note. "For your daughter's medical care. Don't argue." She'd never told him about Luce, but apparently, when you live in someone's house, clean their spaces, see their private moments, they see you too. He'd noticed the medical bills she occasionally received, the Western Union receipts for money sent to Mexico. Rosa had cried in her room that night, not because of the money, though it mattered enormously, but because someone had noticed. Someone had seen her as more than invisible hands that cleaned and cooked. Someone had seen her sacrifice and acknowledged it. She deposited the money. Luce got the monitoring she needed. Rosa kept working. But something had shifted in the house. Marcus started coming home more. Not regularly, but more. He had dinner with the kids once or twice a week. He asked about school, about friends, about their lives. Rosa taught him how to listen, how to ask follow-up questions, how to notice when Emma was frustrated with math, or when Michael was excited about a new book. Slowly, painfully, Marcus learned to be a father instead of a provider. And Rosa? Rosa became family. But the price she was paying, that was invisible too, and it was mounting. By year 3, Rosa had perfected the art of sacrifice. She'd learned to sleep 5 hours a night. Her bedroom was technically off the clock, but Emma had nightmares at least twice a week, and Michael was going through a phase where he couldn't sleep unless Rosa checked under his bed for monsters. So she kept her phone on her nightstand, volume up, and responded to every knock on her door at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Marcus had hired a night nanny when he noticed Rosa's exhaustion. The nanny quit after 1 week because Michael screamed for Rosa, and Emma refused to let a stranger comfort her. "They're attached to you," the nanny said on her way out. "That's not healthy." But what was Rosa supposed to do? Let them cry alone because it wasn't her job? She'd tried. One night, when Emma called for her and Rosa forced herself to stay in bed, she'd listened to Emma's sobs through the wall for 11 minutes before she couldn't stand it anymore. She'd gone to Emma's room, held her, and listened to the girl explain her nightmare about her mother leaving again. "You won't leave though, right, Rosa?" Emma had asked. "Never, mi amor. I promise." Another promise. Another piece of herself given freely. But the sacrifices weren't just about sleep. In 2017, Rosa's mother died in Oaxaca. The call came at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. Luce was crying, saying Mama had had a stroke, that she was gone, that the funeral was Saturday. Rosa couldn't go. Emma had a dance competition that weekend, her first solo performance. Marcus was in London. The backup nanny had quit. There was no one else. Rosa called Luce and explained. Her daughter didn't understand. How could she? Rosa missed her own mother's funeral to watch another woman's child dance. She sat in that auditorium, applauding Emma's performance, and died a little inside. Emma won second place. She was ecstatic. Rosa smiled and hugged her, and felt like a ghost. That night, Marcus returned early from London. He'd cut his trip short when his assistant mentioned Rosa's family emergency. "You should have told me," he said, finding her in the kitchen at midnight, red-eyed and silent. "You were in an important meeting," Rosa said. "Nothing is more important than—" He stopped. Then what? Than his employee's dead mother? They both knew that wasn't true. His business actually did come first. That was why Rosa was here, absorbing the overflow of his choices. "Take next week off," he said finally. "Go to Mexico. I'll manage the kids." Emma has science fair presentation Tuesday. Michael has doctor appointment Wednesday. Your conference call with Singapore is Thursday morning. Rosa, he cut her off. Take the week off. She went to Oaxaca for 5 days. She sat in the house where her mother had lived alone for the past 8 years, surrounded by photographs of grandchildren she'd rarely seen, of a daughter who'd chosen American dollars over Mexican presents. Luz was cold. She died without you, she said. She called for you at the end. You weren't there. I was working to keep you alive, Rosa replied, her voice flat with exhaustion. I didn't ask you to choose me over her. You think I chose? Rosa's laugh was bitter. I chose nothing. I did what I had to do. Like always. She returned to Los Angeles more exhausted than when she'd left. Marcus had managed the kids, barely. The house was a disaster. Emma had cried every night. Michael had wet the bed twice. There were takeout containers everywhere. I don't know how you do it, Marcus admitted. You learn, Rosa said, already cleaning, already slipping back into the machinery of their lives. But something inside her had cracked. Some weight-bearing structure that had been holding up her sense of purpose, of meaning. She'd sacrificed her mother's funeral. For what? So Marcus could keep building his empire? So his kids could have stability while hers grew up without her? The resentment lasted 3 days before she pushed it down, buried it under routine and necessity, and the fact that Emma and Michael weren't to blame for any of this. They were children who needed her, and Rosa couldn't stop caring just because it cost too much. But the costs kept mounting. Year 4 brought diabetes. Rosa's doctor called her in after a routine physical. Your A1C is 8.2. You're diabetic. We need to start medication immediately. The medication cost $340 a month without insurance. Marcus's insurance covered her, but the deductible was $5,000, and she hadn't met it yet. Rosa looked at her budget. She was sending $800 a month to Luz for university in Mexico City, another $400 to her sister in Oaxaca, who was raising 3 kids alone. Her rent, because she'd moved out of the Chen mansion after year 2 when she'd needed some boundary between work and life, was $1,200 for a studio in Koreatown. After taxes, utilities, food, and existing medical debt, she had $127 left each month. The medication was $340. Rosa did the math. She cut it in half, taking the pills every other day instead of daily. Her A1C climbed to 9.1. She felt terrible. Constant thirst, exhaustion, blurred vision. She kept working. Michael noticed first. Rosa, why do you drink so much water? Just thirsty, mijo. Emma noticed her squinting at the homework she was helping with. Do you need glasses? Maybe. I'll check. Marcus noticed nothing. He was in the middle of a $2.3 billion acquisition of a German cloud competitor. He lived on planes and in conference rooms. When he was home, Rosa made sure everything appeared perfect. The house spotless, the kids happy, herself invisible. That's when the second job started. Maria called in February. My friend's agency needs weekend house cleaners. Cash, no questions, $200 a day. Rosa was already exhausted. She was working 60 hours a week for Marcus. But she needed that medication. She took the weekend work. Saturday and Sunday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Rosa cleaned houses in Malibu and Beverly Hills, rich people's vacation homes that they visited twice a year, swimming pools that needed scrubbing, wine cellars that needed organizing. She sent the money to Luz, who was thriving at university, studying medicine, planning to become an oncologist. Because of what you did for me, Mama, Luz wrote. I want to help others, like me. Rosa taped that email to her bathroom mirror. On the days when she could barely stand, when her feet ached from 18-hour days, when her blood sugar was spiking and her vision was blurring, she read it. Purpose. Meaning. Sacrifice. But your body keeps score, even when your will is iron. Year 5 was when Rosa started sleeping in her car. Her landlord raised the rent to $1,400. She couldn't afford it. She couldn't ask Marcus for more money. He'd already given her raises, already paid for Luce's medical emergencies, already done more than most employers would dream of. She moved her essentials into her 2003 Honda Civic, clothes in the trunk, toiletries in a bag, blanket in the back seat. She parked in the Chen mansion's circular driveway, showered in the pool house before the kids woke up, changed in the pool house bathroom. No one noticed. She told herself it was temporary, just until she saved enough for first and last month's rent on a new place, just until Luce graduated, just until. But temporary became 3 months, then 6 months, then a year. Rosa learned to sleep sitting up, learned to wake before dawn security patrols, learned to keep her life compressed into spaces small enough that they stayed invisible. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, life continued. Emma was now 12, brilliant and intense, applying to prestigious middle schools. Michael was 10, quieter but thoughtful, with a gift for storytelling. Marcus was richer. NetVault's acquisition had been successful. His net worth had climbed past $4 billion, and marginally more present. He had dinner with the kids 3 times a week now. He attended their school events. He was trying, genuinely trying, to be better than his absent father had been. But he didn't see what it cost Rosa to make that possible. He didn't see her pumping insulin in the pool house bathroom at 3 a.m. because she'd finally gotten on proper medication, but couldn't do it in front of the kids. He didn't see her eating less so she could send more money to Luce, who was excelling but constantly needed books, supplies, research materials. He didn't see her staying awake 71 consecutive hours in October when Emma got pneumonia and needed around-the-clock care while Marcus was in Singapore, closing the Japan expansion. He didn't see the cost because Rosa had become masterful at hiding it. That was her job, after all, to absorb the chaos, to smooth the rough edges, to make his impossible life possible by making herself invisible. But you can only be invisible for so long before you start disappearing entirely. Year 6 brought a crisis that nearly broke everything. Luce was mugged in Mexico City, stabbed twice defending her backpack. She survived, but the medical bills were catastrophic. $38,000 for surgery, ICU care, recovery. Rosa's insurance didn't cover Mexico. Marcus's generosity had limits. She took out a loan from a payday lender at 400% APR. It was predatory, illegal, devastating. She knew it. She did it anyway. The debt consumed her. She started taking more weekend jobs, Monday through Friday with the Chens, Saturday and Sunday cleaning 4 different houses. She slept in her car between jobs, napping in parking lots, surviving on gas station coffee, and the meals she ate with Emma and Michael. The kids noticed something was wrong. "Rosa, you look tired," Michael said one morning. "I'm fine, mijo." "You don't look fine," Emma added, her sharp eyes seeing too much. "Are you sick?" "No, mi amor, just a little tired." But she wasn't just tired. She was dying, slowly, from the accumulated weight of years of sacrifice without rest, of grinding poverty in the shadow of obscene wealth, of loving children who weren't hers while her own daughter recovered alone in Mexico City. Marcus was oblivious. He was fighting a hostile takeover attempt from a consortium of Chinese investors. He lived in war rooms, strategy sessions, legal battles. NetVault's stock price became his entire world. He was fighting for survival. His company's survival, his legacy, his empire. Rosa was fighting for survival too, but her battle was quieter, smaller, invisible. She was fighting to stay conscious during 18-hour days, fighting to manage her diabetes on inadequate medication and stress that spiked her blood sugar into dangerous ranges, fighting to pay off a debt that grew faster than she could earn. In November, she collapsed for the first time. Michael found her in the kitchen at 6 a.m., passed out on the floor. He screamed for his father, who was miraculously home, working in his study. Marcus called 911. Rosa woke in the ambulance, disoriented and ashamed. Low blood sugar, the paramedic explained. When did you last eat? Rosa couldn't remember. Yesterday morning? The day before? At the hospital, the doctor was blunt. Your diabetes is severely uncontrolled. Your A1C is 11.3. You're not taking your medication properly. You're not eating enough. You're probably not sleeping enough. You're going to die if you keep living like this. I take my medication, Rosa protested weakly. Full dose? Every day? She said nothing. That's what I thought. Ms. Delgado, you can't take care of others if you're dead. Do you understand? She understood. But understanding didn't change the math. The medication cost money. Food cost money. Rest cost money. Hours she couldn't work, dollars she couldn't send to Luce. Marcus paid the hospital bill, $8,400 that Rosa's insurance didn't cover. He insisted she take 2 weeks off. I can't, Rosa said. The kids. I'll handle it. Rest. She rested for 4 days before returning. The house was falling apart. Emma was sulking because Marcus had forgotten her orthodontist appointment. Michael had missed 2 days of school because Marcus hadn't realized it was a school week, not a holiday. I needed you, Marcus admitted, frustrated and overwhelmed. I know, Rosa said, and got back to work. The payday loan balance grew. Her health deteriorated. But she kept going because that's what she'd always done. What choice did she have? Year 7 was supposed to be a triumph. NetVault successfully fought off the takeover attempt. Marcus negotiated a partnership instead, gaining access to Chinese markets while retaining control. The company's valuation hit $12 billion. Forbes featured him on the cover. The unkillable tech mogul. He celebrated with a $400,000 party at his Malibu beach house, 300 guests, Michelin-starred catering, an open bar that cost more than Rosa made in a year. Rosa worked the party. Not as a guest. She was staff, coordinating the caterers, managing the flow, ensuring everything was perfect. She watched Marcus give a speech about perseverance, about never giving up, about building something meaningful. She watched him toast his success with champagne that cost $200 a bottle. She watched him celebrate an empire built on cloud servers and algorithms and strategic acquisitions. And she wondered, with a bitterness that shocked her, if he'd ever noticed the empire she'd built for him. The one made of clean laundry and hot meals and children who felt loved. The one that had cost her health, her family, her years. After the party, Rosa sat in her car and cried for 2 hours. She was so tired. Tired of working 80-hour weeks. Tired of debt that never shrank. Tired of sleeping in her car. Tired of watching Luce grow up through phone screens. Tired of sacrificing everything while the people she sacrificed for barely noticed. She thought about quitting. She could get another job. Something easier, less consuming. The kids were older now. Emma was 13, Michael 11. They needed her less. But when she imagined leaving, imagined Emma's face when she told her, imagined Michael asking why she didn't want to stay anymore, she couldn't do it. She'd made promises. She'd become family. You don't quit on family, even when family is killing you. The final year started with a lie. Emma got into a prestigious prep school, Ashford Academy, where tuition was $54,000 a year, and the waiting list was 3 years long. She was brilliant, talented, passionate about environmental science, but the school required an essay from someone who knew her well, describing her character, her growth, her potential. Marcus asked Rosa to write it. "You know her better than anyone," he said. "You raised her." There it was. The truth, said casually, without weight. "You raised her." Rosa wrote the essay. 3,000 words about Emma's curiosity, her compassion, her fierce determination to make the world better. About how she organized a recycling program at school, how she volunteered at a homeless shelter, how she'd spent her own birthday money on supplies for a fundraiser. It was all true. Rosa had seen it, nurtured it, encouraged it. Emma got in. Marcus was ecstatic. He framed the acceptance letter. Rosa wondered if he'd ever framed the essay she'd written, the one that gave words to years of invisible labor, of loving someone else's child, like her own. But that was February. By October, things had spiraled. The payday loan hit collection. Rosa owed $67,000 on an original $38,000 loan. The interest had compounded into something grotesque, mathematical violence in the form of a debt she could never repay. The collection agency called daily. They threatened lawsuits, wage garnishment, deportation threats that were legally baseless but emotionally devastating. Rosa stopped eating lunch to save money. She worked through exhaustion that felt like drowning. She started making mistakes, forgot Michael's permission slip for a field trip, burned dinner twice in 1 week, showed up 30 minutes late to pick up Emma from school. Emma was furious. "What's wrong with you lately? You're acting weird." "I'm sorry, mi amor. Just tired." "You're always tired. Maybe you should, I don't know, sleep more." If only it were that simple. Marcus noticed too, finally. "Rosa, are you okay? You seem off." "I'm fine, Mr. Chen." "You don't seem fine." "I am fine," she insisted, because admitting otherwise meant admitting she was failing, and Rosa Delgado did not fail. But her body was failing. Her A1C was climbing again, 12.1, dangerously high. She was having dizzy spells. Her vision was blurring. She'd lost 15 pounds she couldn't afford to lose, and still she worked. Because Emma needed help preparing for the science fair, her project on microplastics in ocean systems was ambitious and complex. Because Michael was struggling with bullies at school and needed someone to talk to. Because Marcus was in the middle of a $800 million acquisition in Singapore and needed his home life to be stable. Because that's what love looked like in Rosa's world. Sacrifice without boundaries. Care without conditions. Even if it killed her. The science fair was on a Tuesday. Emma's project was brilliant. She'd tested water samples from 5 different Los Angeles beaches, documented microplastic concentrations, and proposed policy solutions. She'd worked on it for months, with Rosa's help every night after dinner. Rosa had helped her build the display board, practice her presentation, research statistics. She'd driven her to beaches at 6 a.m. to collect samples. She'd proofread her notes until 2 a.m. But the science fair was also the day Rosa's car got towed. She'd been parking on the street near the mansion because the driveway was too visible. Marcus had started commenting on her early arrivals. The towing company took the car at 5 a.m. The fee was $380, plus $65 per day storage. Rosa didn't have $380. She also didn't have transportation to get Emma to school for the science fair that started at 8 a.m. She walked 4 miles with Emma's display board and all her materials, because failing Emma was not an option. They made it with 10 minutes to spare. Emma won first place. She was ecstatic. Rosa collapsed in the school bathroom, vomiting from exertion and hypoglycemia. She cleaned herself up, smiled for Emma's celebration, walked 4 miles home. That night, she slept in the pool house because she was too exhausted to walk to the bus stop. This was year 8. This was Rosa's life. This was the cost of love in a world that valued it so little it didn't even notice. But someone was about to notice. November 15th, 2023, The day everything changed. Marcus had a business partner visiting, Davidson, the CFO who'd been with him since the early days. They were in Marcus's study, discussing the Singapore acquisition. Numbers, projections, strategy. Rosa had been awake for 71 hours straight. Emma had the flu, real flu, not a cold. Fever of 103, vomiting, delirium. Marcus was supposed to stay home, but the Singapore team had a narrow window for final negotiations. "I can't miss this," he told Rosa at 4 a.m. as Emma's fever spiked again. "Go," Rosa said. "I'll handle it." She handled it. She kept Emma hydrated, monitored her temperature, called the doctor when the fever hit 104, got the prescription, picked up the medication, administered it on schedule. She didn't sleep, she didn't eat, she didn't stop. Michael also needed care, homework help, meals, reassurance that his sister would be okay. Rosa gave it all. By Tuesday night, Emma was better. Fever broken. Crisis passed. Rosa stood up from Emma's bedside to get more water, and her legs gave out. Not stumbled. Gave out. Complete systemic failure. She collapsed in the doorway of Marcus's study, where he and Davidson were celebrating the successful deal. Marcus heard the crystal glass shatter. Rosa had been carrying water for Emma, and turned to see her crumpling. He caught her. Barely. And in that moment, holding this woman who weighed 98 pounds when she should have weighed 120, feeling her ribs through her shirt, seeing the gray pallor of her skin, Marcus Chen finally saw what had been invisible for 8 years. Rosa was dying, not metaphorically, actually dying, right there in his arms. "Call 911, he shouted. And then he did something he hadn't done since his father's restaurant burned down. He prayed. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. The paramedics worked with efficient urgency, checking vitals, starting an IV, loading Rosa onto a stretcher. "When did she last eat?" one asked. Marcus didn't know. "Does she have any medical conditions?" Marcus knew about the diabetes. He didn't know it was uncontrolled. Didn't know. She was rationing medication. Didn't know she was sleeping in her car. He didn't know anything. At the hospital, the doctor was grim. Diabetic ketoacidosis, severe malnutrition, dehydration, exhaustion. She's in critical condition. But she'll be okay. If we can stabilize her. But Mr. Chen, the doctor looked at him with something close to accusation. This didn't happen overnight. This is months, probably years, of inadequate care, insufficient rest, and poor nutrition. How long has she been your employee? 8 years. And you didn't notice? The question landed like a physical blow. No. He hadn't noticed. He'd noticed when dinner was late, when the house wasn't perfect, when Rosa seemed off. But he hadn't noticed her dying. He hadn't seen past his own needs, his own empire, his own carefully curated life. Marcus sat in the hospital waiting room while they stabilized Rosa. Emma and Michael were with the backup nanny, probably terrified. Davidson had left hours ago, confused and uncomfortable. Marcus was alone with the truth. At 3 a.m., they let him into Rosa's room. She was unconscious, IVs running, monitors beeping. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Marcus sat in the chair beside her and started going through her purse, the emergency contact information, her wallet. That's when he found it. The payday loan collection notice, the astronomical debt, the eviction notices from an apartment he didn't know she had, the car impound receipt, and deeper, in a separate compartment, carefully preserved, the notes he'd written her over the years. "Thank you for caring about them. $10,000 for your daughter's medical care. 8 years of acknowledgement, kept like treasures." Marcus looked at this woman who'd raised his children, held his family together, sacrificed her health and peace and years for him, and finally understood the true cost of his empire. It wasn't built on cloud servers and algorithms. It was built on Rosa's exhaustion, Rosa's night sleeping in her car. Rosa's skipped meals and rationed medication. Rosa's invisible labor and unnoticed sacrifice. He'd climbed to $4.2 billion on the back of a woman who was killing herself to make his impossible life possible. And he hadn't even noticed. Rosa woke 36 hours later. Marcus was still there. He'd left once to check on Emma and Michael and assure them Rosa would be okay. Then he'd returned and stayed. "Mr. Chen?" Rosa's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here. Don't try to talk. You're in the hospital. You collapsed. They said—" He couldn't finish. What could he say? "They said you almost died because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "The kids. Emma's science fair. She won, first place. She told me to tell you, specifically. She knows you're the reason. And Michael is fine, worried about you. Everyone is." Rosa closed her eyes. "I'm sorry, I should have—" "Stop," Marcus cut her off. "Rosa, I know, everything. The debt. The car. I found the papers in your purse. I know you've been sleeping in your car. I know about the weekend jobs. I know." His voice broke. "I know what I've done to you. You didn't do anything, Mr. Chen. You chose to sacrifice everything for children who aren't even yours, while I was too busy building an empire to notice. You chose to care when I didn't. You chose to be the parent I was too selfish to be." He was crying now. This billionaire who never cried, who'd built his fortune on ruthless calculation and emotional control. "You raised my children, Rosa. You gave them love when I gave them money, and it almost killed you." Rosa reached out weakly and took his hand. "They are good kids, Mr. Chen. Kind, smart. They will do good things in this world. Because of you, not me. You." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice steady with decision. "I'm going to fix this. The debt, it's gone. I'll pay it today. The car, I'm buying you a new one. Your housing, you're moving into the guest house on the property, fully furnished, no rent, and your salary is now $180,000 a year." "Mr. Chen, that's too much. It's not enough. It could never be enough for what you've given us. And Rosa—" He waited until she looked at him. "You work 40 hours a week maximum from now on. No weekends. No late nights unless you choose them. We're hiring additional help, real help. You shouldn't have been doing this alone for 8 years. But the kids I need to be their father. That's what they need. I've been hiding behind work, behind you, behind everything except my own responsibility. No more." 3 months later, Rosa moved into the guest house. It was beautiful. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, garden view. She had her own space for the first time in 8 years. Her daughter Luce, who'd graduated medical school and completed her residency, came to visit for 2 weeks. They cooked together, laughed together, healed together. "I'm proud of you, Mama," Luz said one evening as they watched the sunset from the patio. "You sacrificed so much." "I sacrificed too much," Rosa admitted. "I almost died proving I was strong enough to carry everything. That's not strength. That's just stubbornness." "What made you change your mind?" "I didn't. Mr. Chen changed his." Rosa smiled slightly. "Sometimes people need to almost lose something before they understand its value." Marcus had changed. He'd cut his travel by 60%. He had dinner with Emma and Michael 6 nights a week. He attended every school event, every performance, every milestone. He'd hired 2 additional staff, a part-time cook and a house manager, so Rosa could actually rest. And he'd started seeing a therapist, working through his workaholism, his fear of being like his father, his tendency to confuse providing with parenting. Emma, now 14, had started volunteering at a homeless shelter 2 Saturdays a month. She'd told Rosa it was because you taught me that everyone deserves dignity, regardless of what they have. Michael, 12, was writing a book, a collection of stories about invisible heroes, including one about a housekeeper who saved a family without them noticing. They were good kids. They would do good things, not because of Marcus's billions, because of Rosa's love. 1 year after the collapse, Rosa and Marcus sat on the guest house patio, drinking coffee as the sun rose over Los Angeles. "I never thanked you properly," Marcus said. "You paid my debt, bought my car, gave me this house. You've thanked me plenty. That's money. Money is easy for me. You gave me 8 years. You gave me my children's childhood. You gave pieces of yourself I can never repay. You don't need to repay love, Mr. Chen. Marcus, please. After everything, call me Marcus." Rosa smiled. Marcus. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up. Two people from different worlds, connected by sacrifice and recognition, by failure and redemption. "I'm writing a memoir," Marcus said suddenly. "My publicist wants a typical tech success story. Disruption, innovation, all that. But I'm writing about what actually built my success, which is you. Your sacrifice. Your invisible labor. The exploitation I was blind to. I want to tell the truth." "That won't sell books," Rosa pointed out. "I don't care. I spent 40 years chasing success, building empires, accumulating billions, and I almost lost everything that actually mattered." He looked at her. "You know what I realized while you were in the hospital? If you had died, my children would have grieved for you more than they would grieve for me. Because you were the one who actually showed up. You were the one who actually cared. They would grieve for you, Marcus. They love you. Now, maybe. Because you taught me how to let them. But before?" He shook his head. "I was just the man who paid for things." Rosa didn't disagree. It was true. "I'm stepping down as CEO," Marcus continued. "What?" "Netval doesn't need me the way Emma and Michael do. Davidson can run it. I'll stay on the board, but—" He gestured helplessly. "I have maybe 6 more years before Emma goes to college. 10 before Michael does. That's all the time I have to actually be their father. I'm not wasting it in conference rooms." Rosa started crying, happy tears for once. "You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. You showed me what matters, Rosa. I just wish I'd learned it before it almost killed you." Today, 2 years after the collapse, Rosa is healthy. Her diabetes is controlled. She works 40-hour weeks as the family's household manager, coordinating, supervising, organizing, but no longer carrying everything herself. She's regained weight. She sleeps 8 hours a night in her beautiful guest house. She visits Luz in Mexico regularly. She has boundaries. Marcus is present. Really present. He coaches Michael's soccer team. He helps Emma with college applications. He's learning guitar because Michael expressed interest and he wanted to learn together. He's also started a foundation, the Invisible Labor Initiative. It provides healthcare, housing assistance, and educational support to domestic workers across California. The endowment is $500 million, all from his personal fortune. "It's not enough," he told Rosa when he announced it. "Nothing I do will ever be enough. But it's something." Emma got into Stanford early admission, planning to study environmental policy. Michael is writing his second book. Both kids credit Rosa, always Rosa, when they talk about who shaped them. And Rosa? She finally called herself by a different title. Not the maid, not the housekeeper. Family. Because that's what she'd been all along. She'd just been the only one who paid the price for it. Until Marcus finally understood that some things, love, presence, sacrifice, can't be bought. They can only be given freely, and they should never cost someone their life. The story doesn't end with perfect redemption. Rosa still has complicated feelings about those 8 years, about what she gave up, about whether it was worth it. Marcus still struggles with guilt, With the knowledge that his empire was built on exploitation, he was too privileged to see. The kids still grapple with the reality that their comfortable childhood was purchased with someone else's suffering. But they're all trying to be more aware, to value care as much as capital, to see the invisible labor that makes all our lives possible. And maybe that's the lesson. Success isn't what you build, it's who you become while building it. And wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you're willing to sacrifice it for. Rosa collapsed on a marble floor in a billionaire's mansion. But when she woke up, she'd finally been seen. And Marcus Chen, who'd spent his whole life learning how to build empires, finally learned what it cost to maintain one, and decided some prices were too high to pay. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stop. Stop exploiting. Stop taking. Stop pretending that someone else's invisible sacrifice is your earned success. And start asking, what am I building, and who is it really for? Rosa knows the answer now. So does Marcus. It took a collapse, a hospital room, and 8 years of hidden suffering. But they finally know. And that knowledge changed everything.